right. It's a little Metallica. Seek and Destroy. I've been doing that now for 3 years, probably. Discuss Your Truth here. Ian Trottier coming at you from Miami. We started this program in 2017 to be exact. Winwood Radio, and it was Kitty, who was a station manager that I got in a dialogue with one day. Just randomly met her, giving her a ride, and she said, Ian, how do you know so much about the Zika virus and the Rockefeller involvement, the patent that they have? What about Cecil Rhodes and All Souls School at Oxford? You know, how do you know these links? This is 2016, probably November, and I says, Kitty, you know, I went to the town hall meeting, and turn that off. I went to the town hall meeting, and this is the stuff I discovered. Miami Beach, that there were easily 300 people in the town hall chamber. Of course, Philip Levine, the mayor at the time, and his council members, the CDC on the phone. I was interviewed by Michelle Gillen, a CBS reporter, outside afterwards. Her and I got close to some degree, in that she told me that she had done some research in Uganda. She was being censored by the local CBS station. All these protesters, and I thought, is there any substance to this argument? Is the Zika virus, is it harmful? Is the pesticide harmful? It's banned in Europe, and what I found was that yes, these things are legitimately, there's validity behind them. They're legitimate claims. There's major issues going on. So this is 2016, 2017. Kitty invites me to start the program. I do so January. First couple of days of January is the first Wednesday. I occupied that Wednesday slot there at Winwood Radio for 3 years. I then left Montana, began broadcasting remotely, and Miami. Returned. I was in Canada. I was in other parts of the U.S., and then returned to Miami for a convention. Typically on this show, if you've caught past episodes, and if you haven't, I urge you to do so. Al McCoy, Paul Hellyer, Cynthia McKinney, Charlotte Iserbit, David Icke. There are a number of very well-known scholars, broadcasters that have joined the program over the years. I urge you to go back into the archive and listen to those programs. Jordan Maxwell. Last week we had had a couple of great guests as well. Look, I'll announce today's guest here in a moment. We will be doing a double header again. Cassandra Spencer joined us last week. This week again, I'll mention who I've got lined up here. It'll be 2 hours. This will be the first hour, of course. But do go back into the archive. Freedom Reserve, No More Lies, at Shrine Day Publishing. We've been waiting now on a couple different things. The book was scheduled to be published last year. It's been about a year, last May, because of the coronavirus. By the way, Zika is a coronavirus. I think probably most of you listening to this program have done your research. You understand the various coronaviruses that exist, and COVID-19 simply being another one of those types of coronaviruses. So I began the program in January 2017. Began after 3 years doing the program remotely, and returned to Miami in October of 2020, which is where what I was saying was I don't take sides politically. I try not to take sides politically. What I do is I take sides with the U.S. Constitution, and the Constitution represents any political party, regardless of whether it's a Democrat or Republican party. The Constitution represents all Americans. So that's really what I side with is the Constitution, those constitutional values, and those are clearly under fire today. Freedom of speech, censorship. You take Donald Trump, for instance, completely banned from a social media platform. Is it within their right? They're a public company, but they're providing they're a private company, but they're providing a public service. Is it within their right to just ban the speech of even James O'Keefe, right? James O'Keefe, Project Veritas, banned from that site, is my understanding. My personal sites banned from a host that I was using. I'd been using them for 15 years, and they took down the sites. And I'll tell you exactly why they took the sites down. StopCommunism.net was a site that I had published. I was in D.C. in December, and yes, I was in D.C. in January as well. I was not at the Capitol. I don't believe in violence, but I do believe in freedom of speech. And it was interesting. It was in December, and probably mid-December. I don't remember the date, but I was standing right outside the Capitol building, as a matter of fact, right between the Capitol and the Supreme Court. And I get this. I can remember vividly. Yeah, I can remember the thought came across my mind, and I thought I've really got to start a website. IanTrottier.com, INTROTTIER.com. This is a domain that I purchased probably back in 2011. I just bought my own domain name, my own birth name, and maybe 2012, perhaps earlier. I have to go back and remember when I bought this, but I was using that host, right? And I used that host for 15 years, and it may have been with that domain. It may have been a different domain that I started I'm not sure if I started using that host with that domain or not. But I get this vivid imagery, and it came to me just strong. And I was actually, again, like I said, I was standing outside the Capitol building in D.C. I said, I got to start this website. They're going to call it StopCommunism.com. Well, I went on to register the domain. It had been used, but StopCommunism.net wasn't used. So what I'd done is I'd taken all the literature that I've compiled since I began basically researching the Zika virus. And again, politics and government and big pharma and big corporation and banking, they're all intertwined, right? They're all kind of intertwined. It's kind of like the human body, right? Your pinky's useful, your thumb's useful, your ankle's useful. Everything works together. Your nose, your smell, your thought, your lungs, everything works together to make up a corpus, right? Corporation, or excuse me, your body, your corpus, your corp. So I started the website. I took all the literature that I published on IanTrottier.com, because I've got a section for literature, work that I've compiled over the years to support the research, basically, that I've done, and I put that up on Stop Communism. Two individuals of importance. Dr. Anthony Sutton, he's the key to all the research that I've done over the years. He taught at Stanford for 7 or 8 years. He gave a speech in 1972 in Miami Beach, returned to Palo Alto. He was reprimanded for giving the information. The information he divulged was Prescott Bush funding the Nazi regime. So he ended up walking away from Stanford, publishing his own material, his own books. And yes, Trying Day is one of the publishers he used. My book will be coming forth here soon in a couple months. The agreement's reached. It's basically all written, but publisher and I agreed to that a couple things because of recent events. I've got a couple great guest authors that are contributing to that book. You can pre-order it right now at Amazon. Barnes & Noble may have taken it off. I'm not sure, but there's a number of websites if you're in Canada. Chapters, Indigo. You can order it through a number of different sites. And so I put the literature up on Stop Communism. It must have gotten some traffic that I didn't realize it was getting, and boom, the host took it down. But the host took that down, and they took down my site and a bunch of other sites as well. So they took down a number of sites under the claim of not supporting soapboxing. Donald Trump had called me a prize fighter at Doral in Miami. I stuck around Miami. I remained in Miami instead of returning outside, which I had been for about a year, and so I don't know. I paired with Google whistleblowers named Zach Voorhees, and so I'm not sure if Two Cows is the domain out of Toronto that runs Yola. And again, if you're dissecting how the information superhighway, the internet runs, its various hubs globally, it seems that there's a major hub in Toronto. Two Cows, which actually is an American company by birth, if you will, but then it was sold to a Canadian firm. Anyway, I'm not sure exactly where it is. I'm going to throw this out at you. Antifa.com. You can trace also to Two Cows out of Toronto, but their home base is Seattle. Whoever operates and owns Antifa.com, which I believe yields the result of WhiteHouse.gov, because it was yielding the result Joe Biden.com. But this is a domain that's based in Seattle now, but it is, I believe, cross-check this, it's linked to Two Cows. Two Cows is managing that account or something. It's a domain registration. Anyway, so Discuss Your Truth was born 2017. Here we are. I'm continuing, and I will continue this to the unforeseen future. Usually Wednesdays, 5 o'clock Eastern, is when I do the show live because of the variations in physical space and broadcasting. It's something I don't really talk about. But the studio that I was using in the Northwest, great studio. When I left Winwood Radio, I used a private studio, this guy ends up passing away. I don't think I ever mentioned that on any of my shows. Not going to reveal the name, but it was April of last year. Yeah, about a year ago, this fellow passed away. So using different studios, using mobile equipment, being based in Miami, there was a period of time where I was not regularly broadcasting or recording for a couple months there around the election. But I have resumed, and what I'm going to be doing here for the next at least couple months while in Miami, I'll be doing Saturday shows instead of the Wednesday slot at 5. I'll be doing Saturday shows to simply pre-record and get those going. So those of you that do listen, and because I know there's a number of you that have reached out to me, that's what you can expect. And I've got the software to go live, but at the moment these are being pre-recorded. So I appreciate your support and your donations, and look for Freedom Reserve No More Lies to be coming here in the next couple months. It will be released. Trine Day will be releasing it. The agreement is in place. And next hour, moving right into things. Next hour, Jacob Nordengard, who also writes for technocracy.news, will be joining the program to discuss his book, Rockefeller Controlling the Game. I think more and more Americans are realizing that we have issues. We have issues that are unresolved. We have issues that we need to be getting answers to, like questions that need to be answered. And I think a larger and larger percentage of Americans are realizing there are problems in the United States government. We're a very fortunate country. Make no mistake about it. We're a very fortunate country. There is no greater country on the planet. But that doesn't mean that this country is not prone to corruption, because there is corruption, and it is deep, folks, and it needs to be cleaned out, and only you can clean it out. Only we can clean it, folks. Only we can clean it out. Dishonesty is just runs rampant, doesn't it? In all facets of life, in all industries, corruption, dishonesty, lies, run rampant. And any type of relationship doesn't. Unfortunately, that's a very, very, very unfortunate aspect of life. It's a very incredibly unfortunate aspect of life. But it's up to you and me. It's up to each and every one. It's not only to have our own integrity, but to hold others to a high level of integrity. And when it translates into invasion of our personal rights, inalienable rights, but certainly constitutional rights, then only you and I can stand up for it, folks, and that's what needs to be happening right here. So coming up here now, I'm going to be bringing him in on Skype. A great guest out of San Francisco, a place that I have been to. I do know San Francisco will be joined here momentarily by Martin Sawa, okay, author of Martin is the author of an intriguing book, and the title of that book is The Other Side of Success: Money and the Meaning in the Golden State, a memoir by Martin Sawa, a memoir. So this fellow has really a great story to tell, and we're going to bring him on here in a moment. Let me read a quick quote that he's got from the book. This is a great little quote, and I'll bring him on because I know he's standing by, he's waiting. But here's a quote. An often insightful look back on one man's pursuit of the American dream. Throughout his memoir, Sawa points a vivid portrait of a diverse and vibrant California. Indeed, that is a very vibrant state. Martin Sawa, here we go. Bringing him on right now. Thanks for listening to Discuss the Truth, folks. I appreciate your support. Martin Sawa here.
Hi.
Yes, Martin. Hello. Good afternoon.
How are you doing?
Well, I'm doing fantastic, and very happy that we've got the right date, because for listeners don't understand the background on this, but initially 2 weeks ago I had phoned and reached out to Martin and was ready to go with him, confirming with him, and he says, wait a second, you've got the wrong date. So I had to reach back out to the publicist and clarify things, and so here we got the right date. Anyway, so Martin, you've take a minute. I think you're probably used to this with your interviews. Take a minute, give listeners a little bit of an introduction to you and to the book, the memoir that you've written, The Other Side of Success. Martin, who are you, and what's a quick look at the book? A quick look at, then we'll get into some of the bolts of the book.
Well, thanks for having me on, Ian. And I'm my professional background was in commercial real estate, and I was a broker, and then an operator, and then a developer in San Francisco and Los Angeles over a period of years. And the book is a memoir, but it's not just a business bio. Before I started to write it, I had to come to terms with how truthful I wanted to be, and decided that I was either all in or not in at all. So it recounts a lot of my personal life and the people that I knew and the experiences I had and the lessons I learned. And that resulted in The Other Side of Success. The subtitle is Money and Meaning in the Golden State.
Right. So to achieve success in a state like California or New York, it's incredibly competitive. For listeners that maybe have not gone to California or visited the state, Martin, I think it's the most populous state, isn't it? Or it's you've got close to 40 million people in that state, I believe. And so achieving a success certainly in any industry is going to bring its challenges. But you speak of challenges that are not necessarily pertinent to the career you built for yourself in California, but there are challenges that you faced to even get yourself to the stage of studying, I think it was architecture, at University of Wisconsin. But even the groundbreaking or the foundation rather that was laid from your parents. There's some incredible challenges. Speak a little bit about what your parents had to overcome in order to dress this for you.
My parents were born in what is now Ukraine, and this was in the 1920s. And they lived under Stalin and then Hitler and then almost Stalin again before they fled and then wandered around Europe living day to day in the last years of World War II. They were then placed in a displaced persons camp. Mm-hmm. If the readers who aren't familiar with what it was like right immediately after the Armistice Day, there were just millions of people wandering around Europe. And so they lived in one of these DP camps, and that's where I was conceived. And then they came over with my sister, who was 2 years old at the time, and 2 suitcases, and landed at Ellis Island, mm-hmm. and then were resettled in a small town in rural Wisconsin, where I was born. So that's my DNA. And I grew up in that little town, and then eventually made my way to California.
Now you've got a career that was built both in San Francisco and Los Angeles, and talking about again. So we've got author Martin Sawa with us, and he really brings a very interesting dynamic into the real estate. Commercial real estate career that he built in that state. The dynamic I speak of, and we'll get into it with him in a little bit, is the relationships, marriages, and other relationships that he's encountered through that career that have kind of coincided with the some very strong challenges that he's encountered through that course of time. But you've got 2 different dynamics in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Speak a little bit about you were an executive with CBRE and Cushman & Wakefield. These are for listeners who don't understand what those companies are. These are property management. Primarily property management. They probably get into development as well, but property management companies. But you've got 2 different dynamics in San Francisco and Los Angeles. Explain the differences primarily in what you dealt with between those 2 cities in your career, Art.
Well, just to fill in a little more backstory, I started kind of late in life in the commercial real estate business. I was almost 30 years old. I had a job that I hated. My wife was pregnant, and we were broke. So I didn't get into the business, by having an MBA from Wharton or that route. Mm-hmm. I just quit my job one day and got a real estate sales license and went into investment sales and as a broker. And I was a broker for almost 20 years, and then at the top of my game, I quit and became an operator, and then I reinvented myself one more time as developers. So in San Francisco and Los Angeles, and these are in the years right before and after the millennium, San Francisco was principally sort of the financial center of the West Coast. And LA was, feature films and everything connected with Hollywood, and also diversified in aerospace and other areas. But as places to live, I worked in San Francisco, but I didn't really like the kind of vibe there. So I lived in Oakland, which is right across the bay, which was more of a blue-collar city at the time, and just felt it was a better place to raise a family. when I moved later to Los Angeles, the weather was great, and I loved to rollerblade, and I do the route along the beach.
Wow.
All the way up to Palisades and back to Venice, and that part was great, and the deals were great, but there was also a vibe that it was all kind of like a movie, and just kind of a fake element.
Yeah.
So every place has its pluses and minuses, let me put it that way.
And when you're managing the properties, that shows up in the way that you're having to manage the teams. Are they portraying, is San Francisco more of a serious personnel versus? Explain for listeners what did you find? What was the difference in the people that you managed in the companies, or within the personnel that made up those different teams that you managed? What was how that culture was reflected? The difference in the two cultures.
From a business standpoint, they weren't that different. I was never in property management. I was in brokerage, and these large firms like CBRE, Cushman and Wakefield, they're now international companies. They're international real estate service companies. So whatever you need, representing a tenant, representing a property seller, appraisal, property management, they kind of do it all. The business in what I did was starting out as a broker in investment sales. And it was the same for other types of brokerage. It was very competitive. And you really work for yourself. I worked purely on commissions. And so you're competing as much with the person sitting next to you as you are with investment brokers in other companies. And when I started, some of the older brokers, they belonged to what was then like men's club, like the Bohemian Club, which you probably have heard of.
Sure.
And the Olympic Club and whatnot.
Yeah.
And that's where the social relationships were formed. But again, starting out kind of late and never really having those kind of social connections, I just relied on my wits and making deals. And it was the same in Los Angeles. You find, and these were large deals. These were like selling high-rise office buildings and shopping malls and technology parks. And you're dealing with some really good negotiators, people's names you'll see in the paper. And one of the biggest attractions, the money was certainly important up to a point, but it was just the juice, what I call the juice, the action of really outwitting outwitting your opponents and closing a big deal. It was a great feeling.
The Olympic Club is an old athletic club. I think it's even older than the New York Athletic Club. And one of the things that I know, because I know a little bit about that area, Joe DiMaggio was the baseball player, was a native of Northern California. He was a member of the Olympic Club. How does the climate change, Martin, with the COVID-19 pandemic? How do things change in commercial real estate?
Well, it's been a big deal, but probably the way I would describe it best is, one, there's winners and losers, as there always are in times of sort of major change. And then two, COVID accelerated trends that were already in place, and that without COVID may have taken, a few more years to play out. But with COVID, it compressed it all into, months. So that was the biggest impact of COVID on real estate, and I think most other businesses.
Yeah, and you've got. Is there a comparison between the Great Recession and the impact that the COVID-19 has had on CRE in the past year and a half?
I think in terms of impact, in terms of the recovery, it remains to be seen, but most observers believe this recovery will be faster than the Great Recession.
Great.
It took 2, 3, 4 years, depending on property type and market, to kind of get back to the baseline, where here they think it may be, most commentators think it'll happen more quickly, at least in some sectors.
Yeah. Let's get into your definition here of success in commercial real estate. Now, before we get into the other side of success, how do you define success, Martin?
Well, in commercial real estate, as in the world of business, whether finance or trading, stocks, or whatever, success is pretty binary. It's almost entirely, or if not entirely, financial. And that means income, it means net worth, it means any quantifiable financial marker. And the more you have, the more successful you are.
The bigger fish you can gobble up.
Yes.
What is the other side of success?
Well, that's the human price you pay for getting the above.
Got it. Yeah.
And it's different for everybody, and just because it's the rest of your life. Mm-hmm. And that's why when I wrote The Other Side of Success, I didn't want it just to be a business bio. You read whoever, became a billionaire, and of course they overcame obstacles, but you never really get to know anything about their personal life. And believe me, they all have one. And to just kind of imagine that you're this one aspect of yourself, and to present that, that's the most advantageous, but it doesn't really reflect the reality that you're a bunch of people. You can be categorized, in different ways, and it's this interaction between the parts that causes conflict. You're
brokering with some high net worth individuals, my understanding, and again, you're achieving success. I believe you used the word wit as opposed to a kind of a social engineered approach, and yet you are dealing with on the home front, for instance, challenges that you've got to be able to overcome, so that those are not reflected in at the meeting table. And for instance, Martin here dealt with one of these challenges that Martin speaks about in his book is dealing with the sudden death. The death of his second wife. Talk a little bit about that, Martin, and how you overcame that.
Well, just to fill in a little backstory. So I married for the first time. This was in Oakland in the 70s. And my wife, she was Native American, Choctaw. She had 2 kids from a prior relationship, and then as soon as we married, we had our daughter. And that relationship lasted until the mid-'80s, and then we separated. And then I wasn't married for a period of years, and then I met my second wife, who was a black woman from the South, who, like me, just left one day and moved to California and did what she had to do. So she had, it wasn't just wife and lover. She became my spiritual mentor and moral compass. and she had powers, I would say, and abilities in what I call the world of the unseen. And so it was quite a relationship. And then one day we were getting ready to go out to dinner, and she just dropped dead.
Wow.
From what I later found out was a congenital heart condition. And there were no last words. And that was the defining point in my life. There's the cliche, if life doesn't get your attention, death will. And it sure got mine. So, and then I had to reevaluate everything, and business was way down the list.
Talk a little bit about that spirituality that she brought. Is this like an esoteric element to life that she brought into your worldview or to your experience? Expand on that, and then also, Martin, did it help prepare you at all in coping with her passing?
Yeah, this is a complicated story, and I just want to tell your listeners, I'm not here to proselytize or try to convince them of anything. As if you read the book, you'll see I think I'm throughout pretty objective, and just here's the experiences I had. Here's the basis for them, and here's how I responded. But she was quite a woman. She was very attractive, confident. She worked for she was the right hand for the regional manager of Digital Equipment Company, which was with IBM, one of the iconic companies, technology companies. But she read the Bible every night, and she was religious. She practiced what she preached. She loved to party, and then she just those experiences we had where we'd go to the store and some stranger would approach her, and she'd talk for 10, 15 minutes, and then I'd ask her, who was that? And she said, oh, that was an angel, giving me life advice. And we ran into imps and other what I call kind of ethereal people. And believe me, I was a hardened skeptic before all of this. Yeah. So it took me a long time to process it. But eventually I said, there is what I call, again, the world of the unseen. There is a reality other than, what's scientifically proven. And then later we met a psychic, and who I just, and that was a whole other thing. And I tried to debunk that, but this woman was extremely skilled. And I'll leave it that, despite my best efforts to debunk it, she provided valuable information based on knowing things that no one else could possibly know, and which were helpful in my life. So to kind of sum it up, when my then wife passed, it was, again, trying to live up to her expectations of me. And the psychic helped in terms of continuing the connection. And that's how I got through it, because there was a couple of points where I was ready to pull the plug. And I also had a good partner at that time. We were developers and operators, and he just kind of handled the business by himself for many months. So
now you say pull the plug. What do you mean by that?
Well, you question what the point is of anything, and then you think of suicide.
Mm-hmm. How did you come across encountering and finding this individual that helped you? Do you think that your wife that passed, do you think she aided in delivering that medium, that person to you, Martin?
No, because I've had incidences throughout my life, which I call the operation of faith, F-A-T-E. And they just seem to have happened to me. And I'm sure they happen to everybody, but most people probably don't take notice or don't act on it. Anita was actually opposed to even going to see the psychic when we first met her. She was given kind of a little seminar because she was biblically committed and religious, and the Bible doesn't deal favorably with the sorcerers, psychics, spiritists. But as she found out that the woman who was just a suburban housewife and was a good Christian woman, she started to, react to her a little more positively. But no, she was almost oppositional in the beginning. And I don't know why I went to see her. We were in L.A. Yeah. And I don't even know. I saw an ad somewhere for this little seminar. It was in Hollywood Holiday Inn of all places.
Interesting.
and that's when it started. So
you have a history through, I think, prep school, Jesuit prep school or boarding school, was it? There was Catholicism had an influence in your life at one point. What is the meshing here, if there is a meshing? Are there parallels between what Anita had brought to your life in the spiritual realm? You mentioned that she's reading the Bible. It sounded like you said daily, and then this exposure that you'd had previously in Catholicism. But assuming these are different things, and we can even accelerate it to the psychic experiences or the experiences or counsel that you're receiving from the psychic. Are there any parallels between the two realms on a spiritual level? Are there any parallels?
I was fortunate. I grew up in this little town in the middle of nowhere, but there was a Jesuit boarding school on the perimeter of town, and the students came from other states and even other countries. It was quite highly regarded, and I was fortunate. I was a town student, and my parents couldn't afford the tuition, but I passed their admissions test and then just kind of started working at the age of 13 and, worked my way through school. And I learned more in high school than I ever did in college. Wow. It was just a great we were one of the last cohorts with what I would call classical liberal education. If any of your listeners kind of relate to what that means in sort of the traditional sense. And then I fell away from the practice of my faith. I went to college, and the world was becoming progressively more secular. And there wasn't any one point where I just, had some intellectual conversion to atheism or anything like that. It was just easier not to do it. But I always believed. And then as life went on, and when I met Anita, and again, she grew up in a Pentecostal household where her mother literally built a one-room church with her own hands in the outskirts of Mobile. But she didn't go for the ritual, but she read the Bible and did her own exegesis, and that catches your attention. And most importantly, she practiced what she preached, and that's the hardest part. And that's what I call putting skin in the game. Whether it's business and you risk your time and money and reputation, or life, I don't know where a person really stands until I see him put skin in the game. And so after her death, just to try to wrap this up, I meditated, I did Buddhist practice, and then I studied Judaism, and eventually came back to, this was years later, and something made me go to a Jesuit retreat center and do a personal retreat. And again, just the operation of faith. And after that, I returned to my practice. So that's kind of the long story.
And you are currently married you're currently in another interracial relationship, marriage. Is that correct?
Yes. My wife, Virginia, and I'm not going to spoil it for the listeners because the way we met had some cosmic aspects to it too.
Yeah.
And that's just been kind of the story of my life. So her birthday is one day apart from Anita's, and she grew up about 150 miles in the rural South, in her case, Mississippi, and like all of us by now, one day just packed it up and headed to California, and did what she had to do. So
now. So you're talking about California, talking about, it sounded like you arrived to California in the 1970s. That's when you married the Native American woman. Of course, my understanding that, you had the Black Panthers, I think were starting in the 60s and 70s, California being kind of an engine, a multiracial, a diversification engine, for the United States. And recently, we have, I believe, the BLM movement, that Black Lives Matter movement starting right there in Oakland, a town that sounds like you know very well. What are the differences in your view? And again, we're getting away from your career. We're getting more into some of the other side of success, but which is so important for anybody, for any kind of business mind. What are some of the differences that you've seen through the decades of living in Northern California? Is racism still a problem in your view, Martin?
This is such a difficult topic to discuss, Ian. And I'm more than happy to, but I don't, we'll just try to give you kind of the high points on my outlook. When one marries interracially, for lack of a better word, one puts skin in the game. Okay, this was in the mid '70s, and if you remember, there was free love and hot tubs in Marin and the Playboy Mansion and gay bathhouses in San Francisco, and there was sort of this liberalism which just concealed people aren't any different in the Bay Area than anywhere else. They were just a little more wary about how they talked about it. And so I had a relationship, marriage, with a Native American woman, and that she had a big extended family, and I was doing business at the same time I had a Chinese Filipino woman who was my mentor early on in business, and so I just got to meet and know on a business, on a personal or highly intimate level, people of other races. So when I married Anita, my second wife, she was obviously black, but you meet a person face to face and you deal with them, and I always seem to have an ability to kind of blend in with different ethnicities and quote races, but you're still dealing with a person. And when you commit and get married, you see each other's stories. And my background, my parents, that was pretty horrific. And what my wives went through in terms of when Anita moved out, class integrated for the first time in her senior year, and living under Jim Crow. But you, at the end of the day, you have shared core values, and you either work with each other, and you don't say to races you're colorblind to it. That's just like a poser. You just factor everything in, and you make the best decisions, and your commitment is to your wife and your children and your extended family, and radiates beyond that. I think today there is just there is a racial component that is so rigid that it's hard to even have a conversation. And you see, if you've been in different relationships, you see that at any point in time, there's no quote race that's superior and inferior. You deal with them, honestly and directly. And that's just the preamble to have a discussion about it. But I have a good friend, and he's politically involved, in the Beltway and all of that. And he said it's so hard to have a conversation today because, one, you have to agree what's factually true, and two, you have to have mutual respect for the person, the people that you're talking to. And the sentiment today, this isn't just about race. It's ideologically, it's I'm right and you're evil, and it's hard to go from there. So what I try to do when people want to have a discussion, I try to find out, what they believe to be true, and if there's a common basis, and if they respect me for my opinion and that. You trace your roots back a little bit. You pay homage to the motherland of your parents. You go to Ukraine, 2011. This is chapter 23, the Bloodlands, for folks in the book. Explain the importance of this Ukrainian, famous Ukrainian Taras Shevchenko, Martin. Yeah, so I went for the first time to Ukraine, and when I was like 60 years old. Before then, up until the Soviet Union collapsed, you couldn't really go and travel, and you were just shadowed by the KGB, and it wasn't a place you'd want to go. After the Soviet Union collapsed, then I wanted to go with my parents, but then my dad got sick and he passed, and then my mom got sick after he did, and she passed. So we were never able to go, so I just arranged the trip through the Ukrainian Catholic University, which proliferated after the fall of communism, and which I've supported over the years. So I had some of their students able to dig through archival records, and were able to find where my parents were born, and I was able to spend some time and then really find out what it was like during those years. And what I found out was that the area between Berlin and Moscow and Ukraine and the city that they lived in, Ternopil, was sort of the epicenter, was the scene of the greatest mass murder of civilians in human history, largely under Hitler and Stalin. And that's the mindset that I brought back. And my dad didn't like to talk about, and then I knew why. And I think, like a lot of immigrant parents, they try to protect their children from, quote, what happened.
And let's. But I want to get some closing remarks from you, and give listeners some final thoughts as they are building their own careers. They strive for success, and they learn to deal with those items on the other side of success. To learn from an expert, if you will. You talk a little bit about that. Some final words for listeners, but before doing that, Martin, speak a little bit about another element of what listeners can expect from reading your book, the relationship that you had with your sister.
Yeah, my sister was several years older than myself and came over with my parents. She had some issues, and we grew up together. But she left the little town, after her high school graduation, like I did, and moved to Chicago, like I did, and got married, and had a son, and then remarried later. But she had, as I found out later, that was the beginnings of just suffering from paranoid schizophrenia and other issues. So she had a big blowout with my dad, and disappeared in 1983, and just disappeared. And over the years, I tried to locate her. I hired, private detectives. Obviously, after I met Mary Jo, the psychic, tried to see if that could help. But I had reconciled myself to the fact that, she may not even be alive anymore, and I never see her. And then in 2010, again, a family in Florida, in Orlando, called my brother and me and said, this woman who we've helped over the years, and we just found out, and we did the research on the internet, that her last married name was Brown, so it's really kind of almost impossible to track that. But we think she was also Sawa, and to make a long story short, that was in fact my sister. So we flew out and reunited, and this family, they were like saints. They were Catholic, and they met her in the church. My sister would sit in the church all day. She was homeless and destitute, and they helped her, get on meds, get back on her feet. And so for 5 years, until she passed, we rekindled our relationship. And that was pretty amazing.
Wow. Martin, thanks for joining Discuss Your Truth. I'd like to get some closing thoughts from you, please, sir, and tell listeners what they can expect from you, your next chapter.
Well, right now I'm really enjoying just doing talking to people like we are. The marketing right when I launched, the world now it's all online. Yeah. So you're just dealing with images, book covers and taglines and Amazon ads and whatever. So just the chance to talk with people is like really great. And my next step, I wrote, before I wrote this book, I wrote some screenplays. I may write another script. There's many stories within the stories in the book, and one is working with my stepson, whose journey to success is more compelling than mine, and what he had to overcome.